I'm wearing exactly the same thing.
That's quite notable, actually. Is that a typical night at home for you?
It's the only item of clothing that I own. Just me and my planets, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
And a keyboard and a little bit of fruit. That's a nice setup.
Yeah, cat, some cards, wolf.
Okay.
Gotta have a wolf.
It's not really a pop album without a wolf. You're hungry like the wolf. Right. You've got to have
those epic themes.
Yes.
You know? Like top of a mountain, wind blowing through your hair, kind of feeling.
Fantastic. This has been great. Let's take questions from the audience. This is interesting because I actually didn't know this. Backstage, you were asked the proper pronunciation of your name.
Yes.
And I was a little blown away. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so my first name is, obviously, it's Jean-Philippe, and then my last name is Grobler, is the correct pronunciation.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, but I don't expect anyone to be able to do that.
You grew up in South Africa.
Yeah.
And you were growing up right during the time that apartheid was abolished.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Well, you know, I was very, very young when apartheid was being abolished. You know, I didn't even, you know, I feel like as a child, you know, all the kids that I knew and sort of my generation, we were sort of very protected from what was going on around us. And so I had no idea at all. I just, you know, it didn't, for some reason, it didn't seem strange to me, I guess, because I didn't know the world that well at that point, that, you know, all the black people that I knew were all just the servants of people. Like that just seemed normal, that was normality, you know. But then I guess the biggest change that I noticed was when apartheid started getting abolished, was just that there were more and more black kids at our schools, and I had more and more black friends. So it was like, I feel like I didn't really consciously really live through it, you know. But looking back, I definitely see a lot of things about it now.
But and obviously you were there when Mandela came to power, and in fact you sang in a boys' choir that sang at the '95 Rugby World Cup.
That's correct, yeah.
Tell me a little about that. That was a really big deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have seen the movie Invictus. Yeah, so this was basically that World Cup that movie's about. Was the 1995 Rugby World Cup. And before that, I may be getting the history a little bit wrong, but South Africa was basically barred from competing in any international sports competitions just because of all the sanctions, I guess, against it because of apartheid. And this is the first big international sports competition that South Africa was able to become a part of, and it was happening in South Africa. And so the opening game was this huge game between South Africa and our arch rivals in the world of rugby, Australia. And it was just this insanely huge, momentous moment that also because of my age, I just didn't understand, you know, I just could not fathom. But I just remember standing on the rugby field and everyone in the stadium was going crazy. It was in Cape Town and Nelson Mandela was right there, and the whole rugby team was there, and it was such a crazy moment.
And what does the boys' choir sing at a moment like that?
Oh, we sang the national anthem, which is called Nkosi Sikelel' Afrika, and then we sang. I think we sang a song called Shosholoza, which is kind of like the unofficial national anthem. It's kind of the it was a song that the workers in the mines would always traditionally sing. It was kind of like their song, and it sort of took on this sort of national importance as a song. And yeah.
Now you grew up in South Africa, but you left to go to England, to Liverpool, when you were about 19. Is that right? To go to music school?
Yes.
Why Liverpool? I've never been there. I obviously know about it because of the Beatles. They never made it sound like a place you wanted to visit.
Yeah, so you know, the reason I went to Liverpool was it wasn't because of Liverpool, but when I went through many sort of years of trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life, and music was always the thing that I wanted to do with my life. But you know, my mom was also in the entertainment industry. She made television documentaries, and she had just been involved in a lot of entertainment things throughout the years, and so she knew what a fickle industry it is. So she would always support what I was doing, but she also tried to just warn me against the fickle nature of the industry and just all that stuff. But I think after, going through like, maybe I'm going to become a journalist, maybe I'm going to try and do architecture, I kept coming back to music, and she saw that I was passionate about it. And so we started looking for some schools, and it was pretty quick that we realized that America would just be way too expensive. And so through a cameraman of hers, we found out about the school called LIPA, which is the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts. And it just seemed like a really cool school because it was small. It was in an unexpected place. It wasn't like in London. And it just everything that I'd heard about it seemed really, really cool. And it seemed like they took, it wasn't about all your musical accolades. It was about, they tried to get kids in each class or they tried to form each class so that every kid in the class sort of had a different skill set in a way. So you could all
So what was your skill set? What?
At the time, not very much. I guess singing a little bit, maybe songwriting. I think the main reason I got in though was that my mom, my parents couldn't afford to send me over there to auditions, so my mom made this like audition tape, and apparently it did the rounds in the university amongst all the teachers, and it was like at the time I had frosted tips. Basically, I modeled my look after Mark McGrath, and this was in 2002, I think.
Wow.
And this was back then, and I was 19, and and I was just this really kind of arrogant, cocky guy who, and she intercut it with like, because at the time I was also studying classical singing because of the boys' choir that I was in, so. You have to imagine there was like me singing some classical piece of music with these frosted tips, intercut with me being interviewed by my mom and talking about myself, and then some other songs. I'm sure it was pretty humorous.
I accepted you into school immediately. So you go to school for a couple of years, and I guess in a way, does it become a stepping stone to America because you come here from there? Is that right? Or
yeah. I finished studying at LIPA, and I had a year to just try and figure out what I wanted to do, because as South Africans, we could get like a 2-year working holiday visa for the UK where you could just spend 2 years there working at a bar or something. And so I got that visa. I spent another year in the country, and while that was happening, Patty, who's my wife, who also plays keyboards in the band, her sister was traveling around the world, and she ended up in New York. And started dating a guy called Neil McClellan. And Neil produced and mixed basically all the Prodigy albums. And he was a partner in this music house called The Lodge. And I think as a favor to her, to Patty, and to her sister, he sort of gave me a shot at like trying to write some jingles, write some music for jingles freelance. And and I think they just happened to be impressed with what I did and kept sending me briefs. And then after a few months, they offered me a job, and they offered to move me and Patty to New York. And
so I don't know if everyone knows what a jingle house is, but you're working on music for commercials.
Yeah.
You get briefs, which would be like, hey, we're advertising a fabulous automobile for young people. It'd be great if the music sounded
yeah, exactly.
like a certain genre, maybe even a certain band. And then would you go into the office to work, or would you work from home when you were working?
Well, in the beginning, when I was freelancing, it was from our little apartment in Liverpool. But then when we moved to New York, then I was like in the office every day, writing, recording, mixing everything to 30-second pieces of music every day, if not more.
And do we recognize any of your work from commercials we've seen?
I mean, this is a while back. This was like I stopped doing this.
We watch a lot of TV. We watch a lot of TV.
Well, I did a pretty big campaign for Hampton Inns. It was like a cover of "I'll Get By with Little Help from My Friends" by the Beatles. That was like, I think.
So you didn't write that one. No.
I didn't write the song.
Right, no.
Okay. So I did that for about 2.5 years, and probably wrote like, 800 individual pieces of music during that time.
Holy smokes.
It was really, really
all
intense.
different genres, right? Because the assignments or the briefs that come in, people are looking for all sorts of different things.
Oh, so many different things. And actually, in many ways, I credit that job with almost being a better music education for me than actually going to music school, because I feel like when you're at music school, it's obviously a really great environment to learn, but like you're not really in the real world, and so going to this place, basically not really knowing how to record, being forced to learn on the job, basically, and also being forced to write in all these genres that I, at the time, had like no interest in writing or recording, was just such an amazing education, I think.
So during that time, you're putting together music for what will be St. Lucia.
Yeah.
And your sound it's very lush, it's very romantic. I know you've heard this a lot, but rooted in the 80s. And at that moment, maybe in 2010, 2011, 2012, when you're putting those sounds together, that's not exactly what everyone is doing.
Yeah.
How did you come to that?
Looking back, especially now, I think that, St. Lucia was born out of almost like a reaction to what was going on, around like 2007, 8, 9, 10, where it sort of felt, I feel like music obviously goes in waves. All art goes in waves. And I feel like at that time, what was considered good and I guess cool in a way was, music that was very insular, I guess. That wasn't like escapist or really populist in any kind of way, And I think around that time, I was trying to be like that in a sense, because I've always been a fan of bands like Radiohead and Mew and Interpol and, that whole scene of music. But I feel like at that time I was almost like trying too hard to be like those bands, and I was ignoring all these other influences that I had as, from growing up and being a child in the 80s. And there just came a point where I almost felt like I was hitting a brick wall with the musical projects I had at the time. And I just started listening back to all the music that I was listening to when I was a kid, before I became like self-conscious about the music that I was making and like more angsty, And all of that music was like, a lot of it was like the guilty pleasures from the 80s, like Lionel Richie, Phil Collins, Earth, Wind and Fire, Peter Gabriel, and I think just from doing that and obviously going back and rediscovering South African music, just all of that music just naturally started coming out of the music that I was making because it felt so refreshing to me. And I loved the fact that it had this quality of almost being, like a little bit naive in the sense that it's not, I feel like in the 80s, people weren't necessarily trying, it wasn't a decade of people like trying to be cool. It was like a decade of maximalism, where like wanting to have like a brass section on your track, like no one would have even like thought twice. It would have been like, yes, book the brass section, or if you wanted something else. Whereas now, it's all about being way more minimal. And I think I'm just more of a fan of the maximalist approach, where you kind of like, where almost like anything is possible.
Tell me a little bit about the difference between working on Matter and working on your first album. It sounds from what I've read that it was both a little more low-tech and high-tech. That some of the songwriting you did on the road, yeah, and then in the recording you had even more at your disposal. Is that about right? Yeah,
so both of the albums were made in like very, very different ways. The first one, When the Night, was made just in this little recording studio that I had after I left my jingle writing job. And I basically had all of my equipment around me, all of my instruments, and it was kind of like what you would imagine the perfect situation to make an album to be, or to develop a musical project. And
it's kind of like that, but with a saxophone, or?
Yeah, there was definitely some saxophone there. Yeah, so, it was just a few years of experimenting and just trying a lot of different things out, following a lot of different musical kind of inroads, and eventually coming up with, realizing that I had this body of work that all sort of fit together, and that became St. Lucia. And then, when we started touring that first record, I soon realized that, I was just not going to have that open time again to do that I was going to be on the road a lot. At the same time, we actually lost our studio, just, because Williamsburg was being gentrified so much. And so I just realized that I was going to have to just learn how to write on the road without all the perfect things around me. And so I just developed like a really good laptop recording and demoing setup, and just started writing a lot of stuff just, on our van rides or plane rides. And then the actual album was like, once all the demoing was done, we actually recorded the album in like a better studio than the one that I used to have, but in a more sort of compressed time frame. Yeah, and I think the good thing about that was, I think that sometimes having confines on what you do almost like focuses you a little bit more, whereas like with my first album, there would be days where I would go in and I knew that like all I have to do today is record this piano part, but I would check Facebook for like 5 hours and I knew I'd have 6 hours, and then for the last 30 minutes I would record the piano, so there were like all these distractions around me, whereas with this, if you're just sitting in a van, you literally have nothing else to do. It's like, it's a lot easier to become fully absorbed in that world of creating, I guess.
And you've taken this music out on the road now. Is there a chance that as you think about recording your next record, it could be more of a band songwriting and recording experience?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, I've already done quite a bit of songwriting with the band for this next record. I have a lot of ideas already in the bag, but I like to write a lot. Like I write probably at least 200 to 300 ideas at least per album, and then there normally ends up being like 80 to 100 sort of roughly demoed songs, and then out of those come the 10 or 11 tracks that are the strongest out of that full batch of whatever it might be. Yeah, but it's I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by some very talented musicians and artists, and it would be stupid of me to not take advantage of that like pool of talent around me.
We've got time for a few questions from the audience. We've got one right up here.
Hi.
Okay.
Thanks for coming in today. My friend Anthony and I, we went to your concert at Irving Plaza last month. It was one of the best concerts I've ever been to.
Thank you.
Still think about that every day. And he's here with me. We're going to jam out to your performance in a little bit.
Great.
Looking forward to it. So my question is, before you guys perform as a band, do you guys have like a ritual you guys do together before you guys go on? And what is your favorite song to perform?
Yeah, we have some rituals. They're pretty boring. Like I'll just do really annoying vocal warm-ups where I basically sound like a cat for half an hour. And some people will like have a few drinks, but then the one thing that we do is we'll do the corny sort of everyone putting their hand in the middle and doing 1, 2, 3, yeah, before we go on stage. But yeah, that's about it. And then our favorite songs performed live. For me, it's Home. I really enjoy performing Home.
There we go. Yeah, hey,
Hi.
in the front.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. When it comes to songwriting, do you like to write the lyrics first, or the beats? You like to produce the beats before?
I tend to, lyrics are normally the last thing that I finish. But often, when I'm writing, I seldom start with like one thing. Like if I come up with an idea, it'll normally come to me it'll just like appear in my brain, almost as like a somewhat fully formed idea. And then normally there's some kind of like implied lyrics in there that, once I've sort of sketched out the track, I'll sort of go and just sing some like gibberish over it, like some taking in fun stuff, just totally random lyrics. And what I often find is that initial subconscious kind of stuff that's coming out of my mouth at that time actually ends up being like at least 70% of what the final lyrics are. Like there's something about the way those vowels and consonants sound together that somehow implies some kind of meaning at the end of the day.
We've got time for one more right in the front here.
Okay, thank you for coming. It's great that you're here. The album's amazing. My question for you is, would you consider using any type of African influence in your music if you don't already have?
Absolutely. I mean, my biggest thing is like I never want it to seem canned or, like forced, like, oh, I'm from South Africa, I'm just gonna do African stuff now, I want it to seem natural, but the thought is definitely there. Like, I feel like Wait for Love from the first record had quite a strong African influence. I feel like Stay from this album is like, there's quite a sort of African / worldy vibe to it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely there at the back of my mind, but I want it to feel natural and to come out of like a natural sort of thing.
Well, there we go. We're going to leave it there because we're going to hear some music.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.